Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream. We have two guests joining us later on to talk about some of the issues of the day. But as usual, I'll start off with a bit of family party news and announcements. Right, just a reminder, if you want to support the family party, there's lots of ways you can do that financially. But one of the schemes we've been recommending recently is our 150 Club, which you can enter by just donating £150. But we also suggest another good way to do that is to have a look around your house and find unused items of value that you can put on eBay or Facebook Marketplace or whatever and sell them. And not only do you get extra space in your house, which is a good thing in itself, you also get to donate the money to the family party. And if you're anything like me, I started doing it, raised my £150, paid it in, and since then I've sold another, I don't know, £300 or £400 worth of things as well. So not only has the family party benefited, but I've financially benefited from it as well. If you've got something that you think you'd like to sell for the family party, but you don't really know how to do the eBay thing, bring it along to any of our meetings. Give it to the branch chairman, and they will be happy to do that for you. Right, a few more things coming up before we get into the meat of the show. Saturday, the 3rd of February, we're having a street stall in Aberdeen. Just to get in touch if you want with details of that. The 4th of February, that's Sunday, at 2 p.m. at Vision Church in Glasgow. I and Neil Ryan and my wife Mary as well will be giving a presentation at Vision Church. See our social media for details. Vision Church in Glasgow this Sunday, 2 p.m. It would be great to see you there. That's their service, by the way. If you wonder what the event is at 2 p.m., that's their Sunday service time. So we're speaking in their Sunday service. Our viewers up in Orkney will be there 15th to 16th of February. One meeting in Kirkwall, one meeting in Stronsay. I understand there are 350 people on the Isle of Stronsay. So I think we're going to have our highest ever percentage turnout of the total population when we have our meeting on Stronsay. So we're looking forward to that. Saturday, the 17th of February, Thurso, 1 p.m. We're having a meeting in Thurso. That was great when we were there last time. Really good. So we're looking forward to seeing you there again. And we've also got street stalls in Elgin and Inverness on the 17th of February. Again, if you want details of those, just get in touch. Right, the last thing I need to announce, this is quite a major announcement for the Scottish Family Party, is you'll be aware that we've been through a selection process for a new chairman and deputy chairman and other sort of leadership roles. With Michael Willis, after, I guess, 3 years of sterling service, I said at some point in this year, he'd like to hand on the baton to someone else. So we've been through our recruitment process, and I'm now delighted to announce that we've recruited Leo Lanahan, is going to be the Scottish Family Party chairman, who will come on the live stream soon and introduce himself, but we'll hear more from Leo. And David Richardson has accepted the role as Scottish Family Party deputy chairman as well. So that's fantastic. I think these additions to the leadership team, I think, are very, very positive. We might well be announcing another addition to the leadership team as well very shortly. We've just got one thing that they need to check out before accepting that. So let's bring on our first guest to talk about that last item. First of all, Michael, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, hi, Richard.
So Michael's been involved in our selection process for our new chairman and deputy chairman, other people in the leadership team. So, are you looking forward to retirement?
Well, it's a long story, but I always felt 3 years was a good term as chair, and you don't want to hang on for too long in case you get fired. But we have been through a really rigorous interviewing and recruitment campaign, and we've had some great applicants. And I want to thank everyone who wasn't successful, for applying, and still to sort of consider it longer term. But I'm really pleased about Leo replacing myself, Leo Lanahan. I've known him for a number of years, wonderful background. And I know a lot of our members will have seen him at conference, and a great chair, very sort of tuned in to the senior team. I know he'll work well with the senior team. and a very interesting background, which I'm sure he'll tell you all about. And being a supporter, a candidate, fundraiser for the Scottish Family Party for over 6 years. And David will be a great support as deputy chairman. Lots of experience, business experience. And totally on side with all our values and what we're trying to achieve as a party. So, I felt 3 years was enough, and it's good to get a churn at the senior level. But I'll be a member, and I'll be supporting the party where I can. I'm doing more homeschooling, with some grandchildren, which is taking up more and more of my time. And I've got a couple of other things I'm working on. So, you won't get rid of me totally, Richard. I'll still be about.
Yeah, well, we're talking about it earlier on, but Michael's still going to be available to support the new chairman and to be involved in various ways and to advise and consult. So we're just working out how that's going to work. So Michael says not going to disappear into thin air by any means. He'll still be very much supporting the party, which we are delighted about. So watch the space for more opportunities to hear from Leo and David and another as well before too long as well. I think we will be announcing. Right, we've got another special guest. We'll bring him on in a little while. We've got a few other things just mentioned first. Now, Miriam Cates. Have you seen much of Miriam Cates, the Conservative MP, Michael?
She's the name. I recognise the name. Was she in the headlines today? Was she?
She's in the headlines quite a lot. I mean, basically, she should be in the Scottish Family Party. I mean, she spends her time spouting our policies to anyone who will listen to them in the Parliament, in the media, left, right, and centre. Really great, really, really good. Very articulate, saying just the right things. The only thing that she gets wrong is that she says all the right things and then says, "But vote for a party that disagrees with me on all these things." In other words, vote Conservative, which is unfortunate. She'll lose a seat almost definitely at the next election, but. Yeah, I think it's a classic case. Within the UK Conservatives, there's normally one or two people who would sort of be on our wavelength. I think that's always been the case for decades. There's always just a few who are a bit socially conservative. But the overall direction of the overall party doesn't really change. And ultimately, they encourage people to keep voting for the Conservatives, even though they don't share their values at all. Would you agree with that? That there's always a small group among the Conservative MPs who are socially conservative?
Yeah, and I think I mentioned talking to one of my students at Stirling, who's quite senior in the Conservative Party, and shares all of our views on abortion, euthanasia. The importance of the family, importance of marriage, but they do get once you start accepting and compromising, they know when to keep quiet, and they know when sort of important votes come up. And I do believe you gradually get corrupted, certainly within the Tory party, and that's partly the nature of politics, that you've got to hang on to your principles at all cost. But there's a small handful who we know well, and there's probably just one in the SNP. And it'd be great to be able to recruit some of these characters.
Yeah, let's see. The time will come when that happens. I saw this today on the theme. I thought it's actually from United States, this is, I'm sure, but it applies to the British Conservative Party 100%. So, Dad, what do Conservatives conserve? Progressives' policies they previously opposed. I mean, that just sums it up completely. So, for example, the conversion therapy ban's coming up. The Conservatives will sort of half-heartedly drag their heels over it some way or another. 5 years' time, they'll have forgotten. Smacking ban. The Conservatives sort of drag their heels over it, but they won't repeal it. They never put it in their manifesto to repeal it. I mean, hate speech legislation, they sort of drag their heels. Give it, next manifesto, it won't be in that they're going to repeal it. They never go back and put right what's happened. They always just drag their heels as we carry on in the so-called progressive direction.
Hmm.
So that was that little picture says it all, I think. Now today, Michael, you can sympathise with me. I'm feeling excluded in society. Education Scotland were running a training session on, I don't know, diversity and inclusion and equality or something. So I saw the link. I thought, right, that'll be good. That's worth going. I'll go and film it. There could be a good video on this. I mean, who knows what nonsense they're going to spout at this. So I got my free ticket for it and went to log on. And guess what? They wouldn't let me in. They didn't let me in the last time, actually, when I tried to go to one. So I then tried on my phone. And they obviously must have known who it was on my phone. And I did get in on my phone. And that was the one about the sex education for pupils with learning difficulties. And it was absolutely appalling what I saw and heard in that. But this time they succeeded in keeping me out. Now, if that's the National Education Agency, have they got a right to keep their training for teachers secret?
Well, good for you getting banned. I mean, that's great. You're well known. Your enemy, public enemy number one for Education Scotland. So it's a credit to you, Richard. And they know what sort of a fuss you're going to kick up. But it does seem preposterous that they're not willing to have you in this training session, and your, I'm sure, excellent contribution about the future of education within Scotland. So it does seem unjust, but keep knocking at that door and terrifying them.
I mean, what they're frightened of, they don't want it exposing. They don't want what they're teaching exposing. They know I've done that before, and they don't want it. So these people, they would never dream of debating. Like when I made that video about the sex education for pupils with learning difficulties, which was atrocious, they would never think of like coming back and trying to argue about what I said. They would never dream of doing that. It's always just, how do we block him? How do we ban him? Or whatever. I mean, Education Scotland, the National Education Agency, block the family party on X, which all things outrageous. We've not been rude to them or anything. We just criticise them. We criticise the government's policy of the National Education Agency. And they block us. In other words, you can't know what we're up to. It's a secret. We don't want you coming along and criticising our education policies. I think there's something far wrong there.
Yeah, when we had a free press, I mean, they would want to be in there. They should be wanting to investigate. But they've got free rein to continue this terrible stewardship of the profession of education.
Yeah. I think next time I'll maybe try with a different email address, or I don't know. We'll see. We shall see. Well, one last thing before we bring on our other guest. Now, Michael, I don't know if you've seen the Scottish government's campaign for egg donors to be used, for couples or individuals who want to have a child using a donor egg. So the Scottish government is really going for this hard. They're spending a substantial amount of money advertising left, right, and centre, encouraging young women to donate eggs. And they present it as it's just like giving blood. It's just an altruistic thing. You can give these things and it'll help someone else and make them happy. And that's it. I mean, how wrong can they be?
Yeah, well, I went straight to my Catholic catechism, which used to be, if you want guidance on the big principles of modern life, and this is categorically, outlawed by the Catholic Church, that you cannot donate eggs, and that upsets the natural reproductive, the procreative, and the unitive nature of marriage, and this is banned. But having said that, I thought hell would freeze over before the Vatican is encouraging blessings for gay couples, which is a scandal that we've been faced with over the last couple of months. But that seems to have been pushed and accepted by many bishops, and I haven't heard any bishops in Scotland or within the whole of the UK saying that that's wrong, goes against the tradition and the principles of the church. And so I suppose by their silence, they're sort of consenting to that. So who knows about this government plan to, encourage egg donation? Perhaps the catechism will get rewritten because it's far too hard, and isn't it uncaring to condemn poor couples who are infertile, unable to conceive? Why shouldn't someone donate their eggs? What do you think, Richard?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think that the thing that is really irresponsible, one of the things that's particularly irresponsible about the government's campaign, is the way it's presenting it to the donor. Because the donor, if they donate an egg, then they've got a child that I think now would have the right to know who they were, who their mother was, who the egg donor was. So the huge emotional complications associated with it. But the Scottish government just does this jolly cartoon advert. As I say, just like a blood transfusion, that this is just something simple to do. Apparently, the practicalities of the procedure have got these complications as well. I'm no expert in that, but apparently it's not a straightforward thing to do. But you can see the two competing ideologies. There's like our ideology, ideally man and woman, get married, have children, bring up their own children. That's the ideal. There's various reasons that doesn't work out sometimes, but that's the ideal that we would hope for. But then the government's idea is sperm plus egg plus uterus equals baby. And everyone needs to be able to get the ingredients together by whatever means they like if they want a child. So any combination of adults in any situation they've got a right to a child. So it's the state's job to provide them with whatever missing ingredients they've got in order to make a child. And the very bottom of their priorities are the children. They never even consider, this children's not going to know their father, they're not going to know their mother. They're just not interested in that at all. But the thing I'm delighted to say is there's a significant pushback. And there's an organization called Stop Surrogacy. And there seems, I think some of the feminist groups as well, they don't like it. So there's a bit of a head of steam developing opposing this, which is good. I mean, we're right behind it. Now, I've met some of the people involved in that. And yeah, let's work together and let's see if we can get this stopped, or just to make people aware of it. In the by-election campaign, Rutherglen and Hamilton West, in the hustings, someone in the audience asked a question about it. And I'll always remember the Conservative candidate. He just said basically, no idea, I've never thought about it. I wasn't even aware that this issue existed. And then Niall Fraser said, we'd ban it. That's our policy. So that's the gulf that we've got.
Some good comments coming up on this one. So,
IVF, yes, indeed, it is very expensive. Right, evening, Dominic. Yeah, that's the other aspect as well. I didn't mention it. Is the eugenics aspect, which is very much alive and well. I mean, you can go to the NHS, to the Glasgow Royal Fertility Clinic. You can go to the catalogue and you can choose your donor with the characteristics that you want, basically. I made a video about that a while ago. Again, I think it's an issue that's got very, very little traction with the public at the moment because there's a lack of understanding of it. But I think a lot of people, once they became aware of what was going on, people were choosing their children from a catalogue, basically. And I think a substantial portion of the population would say, hang on a minute, there's something going wrong here. Very definitely. Now, one last thing, actually, just before we bring in our other guest, and it was, oh, it's not there. I thought I had an image. There was something published in the press this week saying that home education in England is now over 1%. Over 1%. I wouldn't be surprised in Scotland if it's higher than that. Now, you may think 1%, that's pretty low, but that's actually a significant number of children, isn't it? So I think there's a substantial trend towards home education. Now, you'll obviously approve of that, won't you, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, all of these problems we've been talking about and we're all aware of. I mean, why subject your children to that tyranny and these fake ideologies? And parents are the primary educators of their children, and if they're being taught stuff that they disagree with, then homeschooling is a great option. And you see a lot of these parents pooling resources, sharing ideas, sharing rooms and facilities and books, and turning out and lovely, well turned out children. And of course, they try and mock them, saying, "Oh, they'll be total. They won't have any other social contact, and they'll be stunted in terms of their emotional growth." But most homeschool kids I've come across are really talented, and of course, we've got some in the party, haven't we, who have been homeschooled, and in fact, are regional chairs.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yes, I think it's an encouraging trend. I mean, in a sense, it's unfortunate that it's necessary. I mean, I've got time for people who say, no, it's not because the schools are bad. We just think this is the right thing to do. I mean, I've got a lot of respect for that point of view. But I think probably most home educators now would say that a major driver is that they fear putting their children in the local school because they fear what they're going to be taught. And also, I mean, there's the other issues as well, the behaviour, etc., etc. So I'm sure the situation will be similar, if not a higher percentage, in Scotland. The Scottish government was trying to find out how many children were home educated. They were doing surveys of schools. It's a little while ago now. I'm not aware of any results being published, but the Scottish government is on the case. And as I say, they're going to try and turn the screw and make it more difficult to home educate. Just give them time. They'll come up with one way or another to do it. Just going back to a comment that's an interesting one. I won't mention your whole name there. Foster and adoption already have deep and lasting negative effects on the child. Can't imagine it will be any better for a surrogate egg child, perhaps even worse. That is absolutely right. Because what people often claim, because it's a well-known fact, the children who are adopted, sadly, I mean, their outcomes don't tend, on average, to be good as children brought up by their natural parents. That's just the fact of the matter. And also, if families split up and you've got like a stepchild and another husband or wife comes into that situation, again, the outcomes to that child don't tend to be as good. And also the evidence is that children conceived by sperm or egg donors, the outcomes don't tend to be as good. But then you've also got people saying that the children of gay parents do just as well, if not better. Then you've got to think, oh, well, hang on a minute. Where did these children come from? They must have come from one of those three options. Every one of those three options is known to be associated with less positive outcomes. And so, I mean, it's completely incredible that like gay and lesbian parents, their children turn out just as well or better. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. Yeah, so the emotional things are very important. I mean, they talk about children's rights endlessly and focus on the emotional life of children, how delicate they are, their well-being. And yet this absolutely central factor, they won't touch it because adults' wishes are more important than how children do, according to the government. Right. David. Right. Unite for Education, the organization that brings together organizations involved in particularly Christian education. Their conference a couple of weeks ago, there's Christian schools starting up on an increasingly large scale, and the number of people home educating is just getting higher and higher. So that is great. Right, it's time to bring on our next special guest. I think I'll go off the screen for a little while. Michael can have a chat with Ewan about the Cairngorms National Park and the dramas up there. So welcome, Ewan. I'll leave you to it for a while.
Okay, hi,
Right.
Ewan. Good to see you.
Good to see you
And
too.
thanks, Richard. Yeah, I'm fine. This is really exciting. I saw your video on the Scottish Family Party website. Well done for that. Well done for getting involved. And I've got a couple of questions for you. I mean, I've been following this in Holland because of family interests. Half my family are Dutch, so the Dutch farmers was a massive campaign, and of course provided great opportunities politically. And the farmers formed their own party, were very, very successful, and I think it's the majority party in the Senate. But you wouldn't know there was a farmers' demonstration going on for weeks on end in Holland because none of the press over here reported it. Then we had the German. Berlin was surrounded and invaded by farmers, all very good spirited, but put the government into a really difficult situation. And then in Romania, in Poland, and now we have the situation in France. And it did hit the front pages just after your demonstration up in the north. And I suppose the first question I've got for you, are there similarities across this European movement of farmers? Are they after the same thing? Is it the same thing that you're after up in the Cairngorms?
Well, so quite a lot of similarities to what's been in Europe. I mean, I know that it's been the past couple of years that the Dutch farmers have been striking and protesting. I think the main driver of that was the new climate targets that involved a requirement for farmers to cut their carbon footprints. And that's a pretty major development once, it's tying in with climate change. It's a way for the government to meet their targets on paper. I think the German and the French ones mainly relate to the cutting of support for farmers and the increased regulation and increased taxation on them. So there was a cut to fuel duty, and basically it just made farming completely uncompetitive, unaffordable for them. And that was also driven by climate targets, because the likes of red diesel being used, that if you transfer them over to normal diesel, you're increasing your green footprint there. In the Cairngorms, it's kind of a much smaller scale version of this, where the national park authorities kind of run wild on the climate and the environment, and it's sort of become this retesting ground for all these new policies. So you've got I know that some of the farmers have actually been the ones on the Crown Estate, so King Charles's ground. They've been forced to more or less adopt certain climate policies. So they've had to do double hedgerows, they've had to bring in hedgehogs, rewilding, planting flower meadows, all these kind of things. And that's it's kind of like an experiment to see how these policies affect the environment.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so farmers up in Grampian feel they're getting a bad deal, but the common theme there was these net zero targets right across Europe. And I wonder, it appears that we might not have the resources to sort of grow and produce our own food. I mean, we're great farmers, great quality meat and grain, and the horticultural industry very, very strong in Scotland, and sort of fish farming. Is there a worry that farmers are going to be forced out because of beavers and wolves and rewilding and meadows, that's more important than the ability to feed the Scottish people?
Oh, most definitely. It's this kind of idea that our number one focus should be on rewilding, planting new forests, bringing in beavers, bringing in wolves, wildcats, all of this. But there is one simple fact to it, is that we can't eat trees, and that it's a very intricate, it's a very delicate balance, all the environment. And I would say farmers have been doing it for thousands of years, and so far have managed a pretty decent balance of the environment. I mean, I bet you if you ask these Greens that are currently in charge of our policy what crop rotation is or monoculture farming, they couldn't tell you a thing about it. And you know, that's the core of it, is farming is built on sustainability, because, well, if you ruin your ground, you're not going to have much crop for much longer. So, you know, farmers are doing the best they can to look after the environment and feeding, you know, folk in the country.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the opportunities for the Scottish Family Party, because farmers tend to be, the business tends to get passed on to the children, doesn't it? That they have a legacy. They'd like to involve their children in the farm. This would seem to be a natural franchise, you know, for the Scottish Family Party. Traditional, family orientated, family businesses that don't want to be pushed out of business by the Green SNP government. So, I mean, what are the opportunities for us, you know, in this coming election for Westminster?
Well, I mean, I did actually. I had to sit down and I had to think about what is it that us farmers really want. And one of the main things I thought of is, you know, we could just do with a bit more of our own money back in our reinvestment, because most farmers aren't living rich. They're, you know, more or less living crop to crop every sale they can. That it's not generating wealth. That, you know, if you went and shoved your money into the stock market, you would make so much more money. So it's not about the money for it. It is a generational thing. And one of the big things I thought might be a good idea to have a look at is maybe a new kind of business structure that involves not just farming, but a family business structure, as in, you know, so maybe some reduced requirements for reporting to HMRC, maybe an extra benefit on your personal taxes or something, a way to get more back into the, you know, if you keep money in the business, you know, it stays in tax free, something like that. I haven't thought too much past that, but I think that's what farmers are really would be a big thing for them.
Yeah. Okay. So perhaps we should be putting that into the into our policy. We're getting some interesting comments here. Respect nature and work with her. A lot of comments about the nonsense of net zero, and I don't think the voting public in Scotland really understands what this is doing to our economy. I mean, they see agriculture. I think that's the third. They see it as the third main polluter. I think it's private domestic vehicles 1, industry 2, agriculture 3, and
yeah, it's kind of it's a paper world these days. On paper, farming's, you know, number 3 in pollutants, but it's part, you know, I've done one of these carbon certificates. I've got a certificate somewhere in a drawer that says I'm carbon literate, so I know what it's all about. It's carbon that's already in the system. So it's, you know, whereas with a car or a vehicle, you're burning oil, which is carbon that's out with the system. Whereas with agriculture, it's carbon that grows in the grass, and then the cows eat it, and then they fart out methane. And then somehow on paper, it's the farting cows that are the big problem, you know. So it's a real kind of, you know, point over here and blame the farmers, and then we might meet our targets, you know. Yeah. It's just the complete wrong way.
I find it bizarre. You know, think of the Cairngorms. I mean, a huge area of wilderness, isn't it? Massive. They're talking about rewilding the Cairngorms. I mean, what proportion of it isn't already pretty wild? It just seems bizarre. I mean, apparently, you know, some of these campaigners, they say if it wasn't for people, Scotland would just be covered in trees. It'd be one big forest. So obviously the objective needs to be to get back as close as we can to it just being one big forest. But I don't know why. Another interesting question for these environmentalists. A lot of them will be animal rights campaigners as well. So why is it that anything animals do is natural, but anything that people do is not natural. It's treated completely differently. And the philosophical challenge to them is that they will be constantly trying to blur the boundary between humans and animals and saying, we're just another sort of animal. We're no more valuable than the animals or whatever. And yet when it comes to dealing with the environment, they treat human action and action by animals totally differently. So maybe if anyone knows an environmentalist who'd like to come on and discuss that point, that would be a very interesting discussion.
Well, I would say many beavers who are actively campaigning for the preservation of humans. It's not on my radar at the moment, but it's a double-edged sword where they kind of blame us for all of the damage and all that, while also simultaneously dehumanizing humans and kind of putting us in the same plane as animals. So.
Now, I was talking to a farmer in the summer at one of the country shows, and he said that sadly, quite a lot of farmers, they're just basically bothered about the bottom line. So if the government will pay them more for their wildflower meadow in the middle of nowhere or to plant some trees, they basically don't care if they're getting more money out of it. But would you say that sort of attitude's widespread among farmers, or a lot of them aggrieved because they want to be doing something productive with the land?
Well, it's kind of that there is a large amount of folk who are kind of, well, if the government's going to give me 50 grand for a wildflower meadow, I might as well take it. Most farmers are looking for some kind of way to subsidize it because it's, you make a loss most years. So I don't think it's less out of selfishness, more just they really don't want to go bust. A lot of farmers have 6-figure, 7-figure mortgages, loans, liens on their farms and properties that one bad year would end, centuries of family-run business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, in Holland, they made very good offers to the farmers to buy their farms, buy them out, and but they had to sign this agreement that they would never farm again anywhere in Europe, which is sort of ominous. And quite a few farmers took up that offer. I think it was something like 3,000 farmers, but they're trying to take about half the farmers off the land. So there's this whole agenda, and I think it does come down to this respect for the human being. They see animals exactly the same as humans. They see human beings as the biggest polluters, and that rewilding with beavers and wolves and bears, this is a more natural thing. And they talk about nature depletion. They say that Scotland's one of the most depleted nations in the whole world. And as you say, Scotland financed the whole industrial revolution, all the ironworks, coal works, shipbuilding, steel. I mean, wonderful sort of enterprise. And it's no point going backwards. It's no point sort of reforesting. I mean, we reforested a lot, and but we're not ever going to get back to the 98% of Scotland covered in timber. So anti-people, people as pollutants. There seems a worldwide agenda to get to a sustainable population, which some of them talk about half a billion. So I don't know how many that would leave us would be left in Scotland.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I know that it's rather worrying that they're making the farmers sign an NDA saying they won't farm again. Surely the folk you would want producing food are the ones with the experience, But going back to the point earlier about the folk doing it for money or, for altruism, fixing the environment and all that, there are actually quite a lot of the folk who are doing these government programs are the estates. So the large landowners, the likes of the Crown Estate, Charles is very much in favor of of net zero and all of this agenda. So all of his tenant farmers are having to go along with this, otherwise they'll lose their tenancies that have been there for 5-6 decades. A more local example to me, in the Cabrach a few decades ago, this billionaire called Christopher Moran bought the estate with all the tenant landowners in place. He then, over the course of about, I think it was actually over the course of 2 years, everybody from the estate, and that was almost 100 people, had them all removed. their belongings are still sitting up in their houses up there, and that went from arable farmland producing food and mills and all that. It's now just open gorse, for shooting grouse, and that's and that's part of it. He gets millions from the government to do that.
Yeah, but I just think the food's got to come from somewhere. So if you displace farming within your own country, it's just going to be done in another country, and there's going to be the transportation issues, probably lower quality, probably more environmentally damaging because of the transportation and because probably standards are not so high where it's going to come from. So it just seems absolutely crazy.
Well, we'll be pushed towards synthetic foods, pushed towards all these insect foods, and there are massive research projects going on in agricultural research establishments to farm insects as a replacement for meat.
Yeah, I think the public, I think, is waiting to be won over. Well, a substantial portion of the public is waiting to be won over. But I think we've given that a very good airing. Thank you very much. I'd just like to respond to a comment before we go on to other issues. Right, this is an interesting comment, isn't it? So, what an insult to the love and care of people who foster and adopt. As ever, you present no studies to back up your claims, Richard. So I made the point that children who are adopted and fostered as well, overall on average, tend to do less well on most of the things you can measure. That's just a fact. In what way, shape or form, does that amount to an insult to people who foster or adopt? Right, people who adopt and foster, what they're providing is what the children need, and they're providing the closest approximation to the ideal, which has been brought up by their own parents. But if that's not possible for some reason, then the closest approximation, the best that can be done for those children, is for them to be brought up by a loving mum and dad who are not the biological parents. So fostering and adoption is a very noble and altruistic thing to do, as you could read in our policies. So to suggest that I insulted them is totally bonkers. Totally bonkers. And then you said present no studies. So I would refer you to this book, which is full of information on that very issue. So Mr. or Mrs. or Miss or whatever, Talbot Rothwell, that was a ridiculous comment that you made there. Now, that's classic Scottish political debate. You've offended someone. You've insulted someone. How dare you do that? Well, actually, there's nothing of the sort. You're just trying to make something out of me saying basically the opposite. So that's that dealt with. Right, let's have a look at another issue. I've got a clip from the COVID inquiry. This clip doesn't seem to have circulated on mainstream media, but it should have done, because it's an absolute cracker. This is Nicola Sturgeon's chief of staff, so she's a civil servant, and the Scottish Cabinet minute, you'll see it on screen in a minute. In their minutes, it basically said that they'd agreed to use the pandemic, well, I could forget the exact word, but you'd use the pandemic to plan for an independence referendum and to advance the independence campaign. And so the woman's asked basically said, this is obviously showing that the Scottish Cabinet agreed to try and politicize the pandemic in order to advance the cause of independence. And well, you can just watch it. Just listen to this.
But there are some people who might see the conclusion agreed that consideration should be given to restarting work on independence and referendum reflecting the experience of the coronavirus and EU exit. Oh, well done. Thank you. I can't remember what page it is.
13, I think.
Oh, well done to you too.
Sorry.
No, not at all. Always accept help. Thank you. Some people might argue that looks as if the cabinet members who agreed to that conclusion were going to use the work on the experience of the coronavirus crisis as part of an argument for advancing independence and therefore using it politically. When you see it's associated with EU exit, which obviously a lot of people in Scotland who didn't want to leave the European Union reckon reflects badly on the UK government, it does look a bit as if
Yeah, I mean,
politicisation of the coronavirus pandemic.
I think the fact that this says consideration should be given, my recollection, my view, my understanding, my experience of all of this period is that the consideration given was we're not doing this right now. There is subsequently, much after this, there has been a lot said and reflected on about the way in which people in Scotland looked to the Scottish Government to provide the leadership in the COVID pandemic and what they then felt about the constitutional situation. But our actions were not designed to produce that result. If the public were making their own decisions on that, we were not driving it through our actions on the pandemic.
It's not the point of my question, really,
Sorry.
which is that, well, no, I understand why you answered in the way you did, but my question is, doesn't it look as if at least some members of the Cabinet, and eventually the Cabinet agreed, to capitalise on the pandemic to advance the cause of independence? Doesn't that look...
So, as I say, the consideration given to this was not done at this time.
But I think it's laughable. But the analogy I thought of would be like if you got the minutes from some meeting of the mafia, and it said in the minutes, we're going to murder Joe Smith. And then they bring it up, the minutes said, murder Joe Smith. So they got the minutes in court and said, look, you agreed, murder Joe Smith. And they said, no. What we agreed was not to murder him. We discussed it, but we decided not to. That was our conclusion. I mean, it was just laughable. Anyway, what do you think of that then? I mean, how can the inquiry come to any conclusion other than that the Scottish Government exploited the pandemic for political ends?
Well, I mean, did we really need the inquiry to tell us that? I mean, it was rather obvious from the start that this was very much political. But, the fact that she gave such a non-answer towards it, it is as clear as day. It's written down there. We're going to use it politically. And it's a shame.
What a ridiculous answer to give. I mean, did she really think anyone was going to believe her? We put it in the minutes because we talked about it and decided not to do it. I mean, really. What do you think about Michael?
She was head of. Was she head of the Scottish Civil Service?
I'm not sure. She's described as Nicola Sturgeon's chief of staff. I think she was Nicola Sturgeon's right-hand woman.
Okay.
So the most senior civil servant alongside Nicola Sturgeon.
Yeah.
And
was she and the other ladies the chair of the
judge? Yeah, the judge.
Yeah.
Chair.
And they're far too chatty and friendly for my liking, and they treat these witnesses with sort of kid gloves. And let's hope they give Nicola a real going over later this week and really get to the bottom of this and this deliberate eradication of evidence that's critical for the inquiry. And they're just lacking some bite. I think there's the King's Counsel and the judge and the use of the evidence. So they could have really gone for the jugular there. I agree.
I would imagine she may be thinking, I've got what I want to know. I don't need to embarrass the person here and now. It's what I write in the report. But I just thought that was a remarkable exchange. I'm surprised that hasn't been the sort of thing that would be around the internet a lot, that particular bit. But quite quite blatant what was going on. Nicola Sturgeon is on tomorrow. I'm going to try and watch some of that because apparently I haven't seen the evidence absolutely directly, but apparently she had some sort of message exchange, maybe email, with someone saying, but basically what she's just, the conclusion of the cabinet there, we're going to use this to promote independence. And then like an hour later or something, immediately after, she was doing a TV appearance and someone asked her, are you trying to use this to promote independence? And she did her normal Nicola Sturgeon, how dare you suggest such a thing about me? I live on the moral high ground. And she did this sort of nippy, angry response to the person. Whereas a short number of hours before, she was doing exactly the thing. So if that comes out really blatantly as well, I think we could be in for an interesting day tomorrow. I'll be glued to the screen a little bit. I might tweet a little bit about it on the Family Party account.
It's like a total memory loss with them as well. It's like, I can't recall this, I can't recall that. I don't know why I deleted all my messages. It's a rather concerning attitude from a party that's been in government for almost 2 decades now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, some other observations of mine from it. I was watching John Swinney on Today and Humza Yousaf as well. And they both talk in this slightly stilted, obscure government speak. And they obviously feel that that's the way you have to talk when you're dealing with government things. So I think that they're using a significant amount of their cognitive capacity to understand how the system works and to speak in the way you're supposed to speak in that situation. But it almost seems as if that's all they can manage to do. When it comes to how did you make the decisions, explain your reasoning, explain how you actually made the decisions, all they can talk about is the processes. They can't talk about the actual reasoning that went into them. And it's quite concerning. I mean, Kate Forbes was on this morning. She didn't seem to be like that. I mean, she seemed to have plenty of sort of brain power left over to actually talk about the issues. But John Swinney and Humza Yousaf, it's like there's nothing there beyond this facade of like government civil service jargon that they hide behind. And I'm sure they both think that if they can talk in that way and tell the story that way, then obviously they must have done their job properly. It all must be fine. It's quite,
I think that Kate Forbes is having a good year so far. She's sort of the poster girl, the golden girl. You know, it doesn't seem like any of this COVID inquiry is going to really go after her. So I wonder if she's maybe lining herself up for a replacement first minister at some point. That's the whole idea of her cooperating.
Well, possibly. I mean, certainly, from what I saw this morning, I watched most of it this morning, and she was coming out of it pretty well. She wasn't going after the government, but she didn't need to, because the KC and the judge, they already were aware that some things seemed wrong, and that she was sort of on the right side of them as well. Like, she kept messages that there was a key decision-making group that she wasn't invited to in more or less the first year of the pandemic, even though she was in charge of finance and the economy, which just seems really bizarre. So yeah, I mean, she is coming out of it quite well, but I think Nicola Sturgeon tomorrow is going to be in big trouble. The other thing as well I found with the COVID inquiry, I looked at Humza Yousaf's statement today. I think it was 108 pages long. I'm sure someone wrote it for him. So he submitted this statement, 108 pages. And I went through it because what I want to read is someone's reasoning. I want someone saying, these are the statistics we're given. These were the calculations. So this is why we decided you could only meet in groups of 6. And that's why we decided to lift the lockdown on this date and not this date. It was because of this data. So I looked all through Humza Yousaf's 108 pages, nothing. And everything I've heard in the inquiry so far, nothing like this. And the people running the inquiry don't seem to be trying to find it either. They're not asking people, so you kept this lockdown going on for this long. Why did you do that? Tell me what the evidence was. It's just like the most fundamental questions seem to be completely overlooked. It's it's very strange. I find it very strange to watch.
I feel like you're looking for evidence that most likely doesn't exist. That's probably the root of it. We've seen quite a lot of the WhatsApps that have been recovered. Quite a lot of them are bouncing off between two folks saying, well, look, the rest of the UK is doing 16 at a funeral. We should be doing 14. And there was also I'd seen a rather worrying message about whether they should put the central belt back into tier 4 to maximize the furlough payments being received. And, it's just rather concerning that there is no kind of thought to that. What's the effect on children in schools? What's the effect on businesses? Yeah. That reasoning is just apparently absent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, they're in public surrounded by experts, and then the decision-making progress, it's like pick a number. What's your favorite number? Well, they're going for 4. Shall we go to 6? Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, that's it's quite frightening. And I suppose you have to assume, how many other areas of government have been run in the same sort of way, plucking numbers out of the air and just making almost random decisions. It's frightening.
Yeah, I mean, the cabinet papers, the minutes, of decisions made by the cabinet in session, that's something that should show the audit trail for these decisions. I suppose they will be arguing that because it was a rapidly moving situation, that it required a lot of delegated authority to these small groupings, these WhatsApp groups, and decisions had to be made on the hoof. And the cabinet did not have to convene continuously to handle the situation. I think they'll sort of hide behind the complications and the fast-moving nature of handling the pandemic. But I've got serious doubts. There's something coming up here on deleting evidence. Is that not evidence of corruption? There's obviously been some sort of cover-up.
Yeah, I'm amazed at their foolishness and it's a sort of irresponsibility. Because even like in the Scottish Family Party, leadership team WhatsApp group, or in the branch chairman's WhatsApp group, you wouldn't find the sort of things that are in the governments. Now, what's the chance anyone's ever going to come and do some sort of freedom of information request or subject access request, or we need to hand them over in some sort of court case or whatever? I mean, it's pretty unlikely, but it might happen. And that's always on our mind. We always bear in mind that there's no such thing as totally private electronic communication, and you never know. So that's one point. The other point is, I think in these family party ones, I think the people on them, they don't think, oh, well, otherwise I'd be calling Nicola Sturgeon everything under the sun, but I'd better not, because it might come out in a freedom of information request or whatever. I think we don't think that. It's just don't talk like that. So if you don't talk like that in general, you don't need to worry about trying to edit what you say, because you might be at risk. So in the Scottish government, it just seems rampant that there's both problems. Basically, they're talking in a way that's really horrible to people. And then they haven't got the sense to realize you don't commit that to electronic communication means. I mean, exactly the same with the UK government as well, though. Exactly the same. Does that cut through with the public, do you think?
Not really. I don't think they care. A lot of the public aren't really worrying about it. They've got their big concerns, constitutional issues, NHS, all this. The last of their worries, it seems to be, is focused on whether our government is actually competent at doing its job.
Yeah. I'd just think just anything that reveals something of someone's, I don't know, character or wisdom or whatever, that applies to how they're going to do their job. Someone who can't work out that it's not a good idea, if you're like the chief medical advisor of the government and you say you're winging it, or if you're the health secretary and you say you're winging it, you never got a clue what you do. I think anyone who can't work out, that's probably not a good idea to type that into your phone to anyone at any point. Then I just question their judgment in general. What would you trust them to deal with appropriately if they can't see that that's a problem? I think definitely with Humza Yousaf, I think it underlines the game. I just don't think he's very wise. I question his judgment severely. I mean, it hasn't. I mean, on the other hand, kids, if you're watching, I mean, I wish I could say the story. Look at the mess it's got him in. But it's totally the opposite. He just had the golden ticket and he gets promoted. But maybe his comeuppance is round the corner with these things. We shall see. Well, I think we're up. Our hour has passed. Thank you very much for your comments. That was up. Appreciated those. We managed to bring a few on screen tonight. Thanks very much for watching live, and I know more people watch later as well. Michael and Ewan, thanks for joining us. So Michael will be back. So don't worry, Michael will come on the live stream from time to time in the future, even in his period of retirement from the Scottish Family Party chairman. When I introduced Ewan, I forgot to say Ewan is our Northeast chairman as well. So, right, thanks very much for watching, and we will see you next week. Right, good night.